Being Puppycat is an American adult animation TV show that's currently published on Netflix. It got its start as a cartoon short in a Frederator Studios incubator project on YouTube. It combines a lot of the aesthetics, design choices, and writing styles of contemporary cartoons such as Adventure Time and Steven Universe in the 2010s, and merges those with the tropes, visual cues, and subverted expectations of 90s magical girl animes, most notable of which being Sailor Moon. It wraps this all up in a tight little bow of slice-of-life plot lines and character dynamics that is basically designed to appeal to millennial sensibilities. The show's history, production, and how it came to be a relatively high production value Netflix series is a long and winding path to say the least. Today I would like to take a dive into the show's journey, its creator, and what's ultimately become of Being Puppycat at the time of this filming, spring of 2023. There's a decent amount to cover here, so I will be dividing this video up into parts, and for your convenience, I have added timestamps below. So if a particular part interests you more than the others, please feel free to check below. A couple more notes before I jump in. I am acutely aware that public opinion is that the pieces of Being Puppycat that were added exclusively for what is now the Netflix series Lazy in Space are somehow worse or lost the magic of the original YouTube series. Puppycat! I disagree with this take, and while this is mostly going to be a dissection of history, you will be getting some of my opinions in here, and just know that I absolutely adore the Netflix series. Additionally, I was introduced to the show in 2022 via the Netflix series. So all of this that you're going to be hearing about is retrospective research on my part and not something that I experienced as the show was coming out. Cool. Let's get started. Part 1. The Creator. Being Puppycat is the brainchild and passion project of Natasha Allegri. Natasha used to post webcomics on LiveJournal and Tumblr back in the 2010s during high school and college. This is how she ended up meeting Pendleton Ward, creator of Adventure Time. These webcomics, at least the ones I can find, generally focus on a loose slice-of-life format featuring a self-insert character for Natasha as well as that character's cat, Pancake. Her LiveJournal account seems to only have one post left from 2016. Everything else has been cleared out. There are some of them left back in her Tumblr account, and I was able to dig up a couple of those. Tastes of the humor, interactions, and art style that eventually make their way into the Being Puppycat YouTube series can first be seen here in these comics. Natasha then goes on to be a primary storyboard revisionist for Adventure Time, and eventually gets to pen and storyboard her own episodes of the show. Specifically, it would seem as though she was primarily responsible for a lot of the character and prop designs in the early seasons of the show, and is specifically credited with the design of gender-bent versions of the characters Finn and Jake. The gender-swapped versions of these characters, Fiona and Cake, were presumably meant to be a one-episode gag at first, but the response to them was so overwhelmingly positive, there was so much fan art and stuff, that they went on to be featured in 5 episodes of Adventure Time over the course of its run. That being said, it does feel disingenuous to gloss over the fact that traditionally nerdy interests such as cartoons are typically overrun in their fandoms with casual misogyny. And so, there were detractors who would harass and harangue Allegri via her Tumblr, and I'm also sure that they were harassing her over whatever other platforms they could find her on, be that LiveJournal or DeviantArt, but at this point, her LiveJournal is defunct, as we've talked about, and while her Twitter is still alive and well, I did kind of search back through it to see if there was any evidence of this, and while there wasn't too much, I don't think that's necessarily the whole story. After her success working on Adventure Time, Natasha had the opportunity to craft what we now know as the original incarnation of Being Puppycat, a cartoon short as part of a Frederator Studios incubator project on YouTube, 2 Cool Cartoons. Part 2. Frederator Studios and Cartoon Hangover. Frederator Studios is an American animation television production studio. The studio primarily focuses on artists who write their own shorts, series, and movies. Their slogan is, "Original Cartoons Since 1998. So basically, their most famous properties have roots in their incubator projects, which gave an opportunity to both artists and Frederator Studios by allowing artists to debut completed projects and allowing Frederator Studios to see what resonates with audiences before producing a full series. The most successful of these often mutate into their own series. The first of these incubator projects was a 48-short series called What a Cartoon, also known as World Premiere Toons. The shorts that originated here would go on to be part of a programming block on Cartoon Network called Cartoon Cartoons. This project brought us the original incarnations/pilots of other cartoons that you are almost certainly familiar with, such as the Powerpuff Girls, Johnny Bravo, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, among others. Frederator Studios continued on to produce several more of these incubator projects under different names, such as Random Cartoons and Oh Yeah Cartoons. While not every short that debuted as part of one of these projects went on to be a larger success story, it seems pretty self-explanatory that you are a lot more likely to be greenlit for a full season of a series on a major network such as Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon for having been part of one of these. While the Adventure Time pilot did originally air as a Nicktoon, the airing that garnered it the attention that would lead to its eventual long-term success and popularity was actually a re-airing later that year as part of Random Cartoons. Adventure Time went on to begin its full series run in April of 2010 and ran for 8 years. This began Natasha Allegri's relationship with Frederator Studios, as Adventure Time would go on to run on Cartoon Network under Frederator Studios' production oversight. Frederator Studios became a division of parent company Frederator Networks when founder Fred Cyber announced the company's new YouTube-funded channel and adult production label, Cartoon Hangover, in February of 2012. This was a part of an effort by Google at the time called the YouTube Original Channel Initiative, during which time Google threw a collective $100 million at various creators in an effort to get more original content on their platforms. At launch, Frederator Studios created several animated series for Cartoon Hangover, including Bravest Warriors, created by Pendleton Ward, as well as Too Cool Cartoons, an incubator featuring pilots from several different creators. In July of 2013, as part of Too Cool Cartoons, Cartoon Hangover premiered the first part of a 10-minute short, Bee and Puppycat. For anyone who's seen the fully funded Kickstarter project or the Netflix series, you're definitely going to notice a stark difference in tone and visuals between the Bee and Puppycat from the original Cartoon Hangover short and what the show would eventually become. The shorts produced in these incubators were primarily produced by their individual creators, and so you can see a lot of Natasha's personal art style and sense of humor reflected here, very similar to her normal life comics from back in her LiveJournal and Tumblr days. Notably though, the voice actress for Bee, Alan Rachel, has maintained consistent all the way from the very first iteration of the show. I do want to note something that has carried over all the way from the original incarnation. At the end of this 10-minute short film, there's kind of a cliffhanger teaser at the end regarding Puppycat's identity and the world building of the show, which was all way too much to ever possibly fit in a 10-minute short. This sort of cliffhanger world building would become a staple of the series to date. The current representation of the original shorts on YouTube is parts 1 and 2 combined into one video on Cartoon Hangover's YouTube channel. While the original shorts do still exist, if you just search for Bee and Puppycat on YouTube, it yields none of that, and it just comes up with the video of parts 1 and 2. You have to be specifically looking to get a hold of the video of the original short by itself. At the time of writing the script of this video, these episodes have 9.8 million views on YouTube. This doesn't even account for 4.4 million views that are on the original part 1 posted by itself, and 4 million of those 4.4 million views occurred within 3 months of the video originally being posted. So, needless to say, people fell in love with Bee and Puppycat in a way that would clearly indicate that it should be getting the Adventure Time treatment, right? I mean, it's a perfect formula. Adventure Time storyboarder, built-in online audience craning for more content in the early 2010s, and a production studio that's already familiar with this project and has seen other shorts from their original incarnations into hugely popular cartoons.
What could possibly go wrong?
Part 3. The Kickstarter. On October 15th of 2013, a Kickstarter was launched by Frederator. This Kickstarter would fund a full Bee and Puppycat YouTube series to be produced by Frederator for Cartoon Hangover, with Natasha Allegri at the helm. If you're anything like myself, you may find yourself wondering why a production studio responsible for the likes of the Powerpuff Girls, The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, and Adventure Time would need $600,000 of money from their fans $600,000 in order to complete 6 6-minute web series episodes. And wouldn't you know, they do address this in the Kickstarter pitch. I do not feign to know the inner workings of how animation, particularly adult animation studios, procure and utilize their resources and funding to operate their inner machinations, and frankly, this video is already going to be long enough without me going on a sidebar tangent explaining all of that in general. So while I do still feel a bit skeptical, I have little other option for the purpose of this retrospective than to just accept their statements on the Kickstarter text at face value. So the Kickstarter, with a lofty goal of $600,000, promises to deliver television production quality cartoons in the form of 6 brand new 6-minute episodes of Bee and Puppycat. In a section titled Why Kickstarter, Frederator provides the following bulleted points. 1. Shows get made with outside investment, but that means outside influence. 2. Securing funds for a series can take years. And 3. You want more Bee and Puppycat now, and so do we. So essentially, the answer to the question of why would Frederator Studios need $600,000 of money from their fans in the form of a Kickstarter to accomplish this feat is A, allowing Natasha Allegri to keep full creative control over the characters and world building due to a lack of outside influences from people who gave a bunch of money to the project, and B, skipping over the lengthy and often arduous process of acquiring that funding to begin with. From where I'm sitting, this all tracks pretty well against what I understand about funding and accountability to investors from my experience in the tech industry, so let's move on. The Kickstarter also implies that the series will continue to follow a Sailor Moon-esque Monster of the Week and Makeover of the Week structure as Bee and Puppycat take on jobs in temp space during each episode. In exchange for being a backer, those who pledge money to the Kickstarter are promised early access to the episodes, access to a backers blog, a physical thank you card, PDFs of the storyboards, a ringtone, and other things. Was a ringtone even still relevant in 2013? I don't really remember people going after ringtones when I was graduating high school. The Kickstarter also promises that for every $80,000 raised above and beyond the initially sought $600,000, that they would produce an additional episode of the show. According to the last indication of a stretch goal on the Kickstarter, the eventual episode count would be 9, with the Kickstarter having raised $872,133. That's 3 additional episodes worth, and about an additional half an episode worth raised on top of that. They ended up producing 10 episodes, which means that with the 6-minute runtime of each episode, this would mean an hour of brand new Bee and Puppycat content for fans. This massive funding was provided by 18,209 backers, and at the time of the Kickstarter's completion, it was the most funded animation project in the site's history. Now, 10 years later in 2023, it is still number 6 on the most funded animation projects list. At the time of its funding, it was the #1 project based on a YouTube creation and number 4 in all of film and video. This includes anything live action or things that would eventually go on to be Hollywood productions. It still sits at number 15 in the most funded film and video category. Needless to say, Bee and Puppycat's Kickstarter was a massive success. It was also recognized with the Projects We Love tag on Kickstarter, self-described in a blog post as, "Projects We Love is an evolution of staff picks, a feature we used in the past to connect creators and backers around best-in-class projects. The difference is that Projects We Love automatically get a nice little badge, so that everyone can tell we're extra excited about a project. Projects We Love are featured by a team that works to surface extra bright projects. They are not paid endorsements, and like any other project, they retain complete creative independence. Most simply, a Project We Love badge is a show of respect and enthusiasm from us here at Kickstarter." Like most well-funded Kickstarter projects, Bee and Puppycat did not manage to avoid production setbacks and maligned expectations, although not nearly to the same degree as some other projects. We're looking at you, Homestuck. The initial episodes of Bee and Puppycat were slated to be released in summer of 2014, according to the Kickstarter. A 2-part premiere aired on November 6th of 2014, so that's not too far off. 2 more episodes were released in December of 2014 before we started seeing fairly large gaps in episode releases. The next 2 episodes would see a release to Kickstarter backers in August of 2015, and then to general audiences in late 2016, along with the rest of the back half of the series. However, rather than being posted on YouTube in line with the original promises of the Kickstarter, these episodes as well as the rest of the series would be uploaded to a new streaming service called Verve, a split-off of Crunchyroll and Funimation dedicated to web-only content. Part 4. Verve. On the topic of Verve, you start to get really into the weeds of corporate ownership over streaming rights and streaming services, and it gets pretty dense. Verve is an online streaming service launched in November of 2016 by AT&T in tandem with the Chernin Group, an investment conglomerate. The service was to be owned by Crunchyroll and operated by Sony. The idea here was basically to get digital content and anime broadcast out to a larger audience over the internet in a legal viewing environment. As you may or may not know, watching anime back in the late 2000s, early 2010s was a lot of illegal link passing, trying to get things uploaded past copyright filters on YouTube, so on and so forth. So on the overall, Verve and Crunchyroll would seem to be good for anime viewing, I guess. I still don't see how this plan was supposed to remotely address any anime viewing needs as they were back in 2016, and I promise I tried to research this as much as possible in the name of fairness. Initial groups signing on to publish their content on Verve included Rooster Teeth, the creators of Red vs. Blue, Nerdist, and, drumroll please, Cartoon Hangover. Alright, so now it's time to get into it. This move of being Puppycat onto Verve was problematic for a few reasons. The first of which being, this is just simply, explicitly, not what was promised in the Kickstarter. At the time of the Kickstarter, Cartoon Hangover was exclusively a YouTube channel. All of the links to being Puppycat content in the Kickstarter description lead to the YouTube videos. All of the views that they cite being Puppycat getting are from YouTube. YouTube, for all of its many faults, is a polished, well-established, and accessible to all place to view content, and was so even back in 2016. Verve, on the other hand, is a random platform that no one has ever heard of. You're probably hearing about it for the first time watching this video. And the reviews of the UI and functionality at the time of being Puppycat's launch on the service were not great, to say the least. Additionally, I asked some people on the being Puppycat subreddit about their opinions about this period of time for being Puppycat, and the general consensus was that Verve was, to no one's surprise, not good. While this may seem like a minor difference in the grand scheme of things, raising money from your fans is just simply not a way to be accountable to no one. As a matter of fact, it makes you accountable to more people. It makes you accountable to a public and to your fans that are supporting your product. If you're releasing your content on an entirely different platform, not to mention an entirely different quality of platform, you are inherently not fulfilling your obligations to your 18,000 plus investors. And yes, that's what they are. Kickstarter backers are investors, just the same as investors who pledge thousands and thousands of dollars each on a board of directors, and you're inherently setting the product up for failure by putting it on a quality of platform that it's much lower than what you initially pitched. When you have investors, you become obligated to do what is best for the product that those investors invested in. Moving being Puppycat onto Verve was just implicitly bad for the show. That doesn't even mention the fact that, based on my research, the Cartoon Hangover channel on Verve was locked behind a paywall. I've seen reports of this being as low as a $3 a month charge and as high as a $10 a month charge, although I do think that number of a $10 a month charge was for the Verve premium subscription overall. Either way, this is a far cry from the structure of the Cartoon Hangover channel on YouTube. Additionally, backers were not given a different way to watch the content. They had to go watch it on Verve, which means if it's locked behind a paywall, then you're basically locking your investors out of engaging with your product. Lastly, Verve was a US-only service, which means that the Bein' Puppycat series became viewable only in the US, another thing not explicitly outlined in the Kickstarter. And while you can get around that with a VPN, that's another payment to make in order to view a thing that you probably already paid money for. I have a Verve headache. So, it's now late 2016. The full Kickstarter series has aired on Verve. How is it? The original 10-episode run funded by the Kickstarter has an eclectic feel, similar to cartoons it's inspired by and following in the footsteps of from the 2010s, i.e. Steven Universe and Adventure Time, etc. B is a bit childish and impulsive, and Puppycat's often left playing her straight man, which is a far cry from the incidentally irresponsible but ultimately caring and dedicated community member we see B as in the reboot. As promised by the Kickstarter, the show follows a Monster of the Week sort of Sailor Moon format where Bee and Puppycat jump into temp space, change outfits, and then go complete some wacky temp space job. Some bits of lore will be sprinkled here and there throughout the episodes, but given that these are 6-minute long episodes and they've kind of got this very frenetic high energy vibe to them, it's kind of hard to find the time for that in this 10-episode run. The animation style leans much closer to the style that we would eventually see in the Netflix series than it does to the style of the original 2-part short, but it still has more distinct notes of Allegri's slice-of-life comic format. All in all, it's a little over an hour of eclectic animated television fun that, while reflective of its contemporaries, separates itself out by really appealing to that younger millennial sense of helplessness and early adulthood that we see in B. Part 5. Bein' Puppycat in Limbo. In spite of its move to the ultimately failed streaming service Verve, Bein' Puppycat managed to make a major splash and accrue a loyal and dedicated following both online and among nerds aplenty. In March of 2017, Frederator announced that new episodes of Bee and Puppycat were being written, initially slated to be released on Verve. In June of 2018, the trailer for the continuation of Bee and Puppycat, now titled Lazy in Space, aired, and was supposed to air in 2019 sometime. Supposed is doing a lot of the lifting here. An episode was screened in September of 2019 at the Ottawa International Animation Festival, but did not release on Verve as planned. By 2019, Verve was suffering from several major channels leaving, as well as its parent company being way more focused on HBO Max than doing anything with Verve. And in the year of our Lord 2023, we can see how well that worked out for all involved parties. Throughout 2018 and 2019, Verve continued to press Bee and Puppycat Lazy in Space on its social media just like super hard. Just posting about it constantly, being super cheeky about it. It was just the absolute tea. But 2019 comes and goes, and no more Bee and Puppycat ever airs on Verve. As Twitter user Buzz says, this did not age well. In 2020, the 13 then produced episodes of Lazy in Space were leaked onto Fred Seibert, the CEO of Frederator Studios' Vimeo channel. The episodes were removed from Vimeo and pretty swiftly, but not before several streaming services and bootleggers managed to swipe them and repost them. Seibert stepped down from his position as CEO of Frederator Studios in August, though the company indicated that he would remain an executive producer on Bee and Puppycat. In October of 2020, it was announced that Netflix would be distributing the season in 2022. But there are a couple issues going on here. One is that it's now been nearly a decade since the original short was released, and not much less than that since starting the production of the Kickstarter episodes. This means that any stylistic differences that occurred in that massive time gap are going to result in a huge tonal dissonance for the audience. The other and more pressing issue from Netflix's perspective is that even if the original hour of Bee and Puppycat content wasn't going to be wildly different from what was produced for Lazy in Space, this content was caught up in some sort of exclusivity contract between Verve and Frederator. Lastly, because of not being able to get a hold of these episodes and not wanting to put them together with the Lazy in Space episodes anyways because of the formatting and tonal differences, this would mean that people coming into the series fresh would have no context for the wacky misadventures of Bee and Puppycat. And while the world building of the show is excellent in my opinion, I wouldn't recommend a viewing experience that starts and ends with the originally produced 13 Lazy in Space episodes. Alright, so we can't get a hold of the old episodes to put on Netflix. And even if we could, Netflix isn't going to want to do that because of the tonal and formatting differences between the original episodes and what was produced for Lazy in Space. But Lazy in Space is going to be rendered basically unwatchable due to lack of context from earlier episodes. So what's on Netflix to do? Well, I will tell you. What they decided to do was brand the whole thing as a reboot to the series. 3 new episodes were commissioned that retell the story of the original YouTube series, and these were presented along with the 13 episodes produced in 2019 as Lazy in Space. The episodes were renumbered accordingly, meaning that the first of the 3 Netflix-produced episodes, again for the first time, is listed as episode 1, and what was originally the first of the 13 produced Lazy in Space episodes, Gentle Touch, is now listed as episode 4, for a whopping 16 episode completed series. The series launched on September 6th, 2022. Amen. Hallelujah. Yes, God. Part 6. Bee and Puppycat Lazy in Space, my review. Put the wine in the sippy cup, drink it all up. Alright, so this is the part of the video where I start discussing the actual contents of Bee and Puppycat the show at length and giving some opinions, as well as responding to some criticism I've seen online of the Lazy in Space series. This means there will be spoilers ahead, so if you've somehow made it to this point in the video and have not watched Bee and Puppycat, either the Kickstarter series or Lazy in Space, I don't know what you're doing here still, but thank you so much for spending time with me. However, you may want to pause the video and come back, or skip ahead to the conclusion. Alright, let's get into this. The first 3 episodes of Lazy in Space, that being the episodes that recap the original Kickstarter series, are, in my humble opinion, an absolute masterpiece. A masterwork, cannot be beaten. Mwah. This includes, again for the first time, Who Would Want This? And What Do You Want to Be? They take bits and pieces of the temp jobs from the Kickstarter series and sometimes arrange them in montages, sometimes use them as full episode temp jobs, and now use the available runtime of 30 minutes to focus on character work and world building, rather than just trying to jam in more plot or do more like camp or jokes or whatever. The Kickstarter series did a great job communicating full, if short, little plot lines, and there's only so much that you can do with a 6-minute runtime, and so often Bee and Puppycat in these episodes on the Kickstarter series are left feeling like unwavering caricatures and just big set-in-stone personality traits. In Lazy in Space, we're able to get to spend so much more time with the characters in these silly little slice-of-life scenarios that does so much to flush out and give justice to Bee and Puppycat as characters. Bee is consistently characterized in a way that definitely leaves us with the feeling that while she is flawed, yes, she ultimately means well and is not a thoughtless, childlike, chaotic force as she's often seen in the Kickstarter series. Throughout the third episode, What Do You Want to Be?, she subtly encourages Deckard to go to cooking school because she knows it's what's best for him. She knows that hovering around her is just a security blanket for him. She cares so much for the feelings of Mooley, the cat-like, wish-granting, donut-making alien that they come across, even though she has just met him. And when the forces that have been after Puppycat for some time come after him once again, she risks her safety to try and help both Mooley and Deckard without a second thought. They do a great job of foreshadowing some of the details about Puppycat during these first 3 episodes, such as, towards the end of episode 3, they show the way that his body is pliable to set up the way that stress affects his cursed body later in the show. They're efficient and subtle about establishing his background as the space outlaw and leave plenty to be desired as far as information to be uncovered, some of which is and some of which isn't throughout the rest of Lazy in Space. I've always thought that the whole island in Bee and Puppycat feels alive and dynamic, but somehow also suspended in space and time and predictable in a way that the Pelican Town in Stardew Valley feels, and I feel like they do a great job of establishing this through the first 3 episodes of Lazy in Space. Beyond the first 3 episodes, the slice of life really starts to kick in. They slowly disseminate you a plot about a space outlaw candy hunter who was betrayed by his love and in an attempted murder is cursed to live in a body that is completely disconnected and disjointed from how he sees himself. Bee is a cyborg who is not aging and has presumably not been for quite some time. We can guesstimate about 20 years or so, at least, based on the fact that Deckard and Cass seem to have grown up with Bee being the age and physical appearance that she currently is. This makes her a perfect foil and a perfect person for Puppycat to have run into. Bee, unlike Puppycat, sees no point in rushing from thing to thing or trying to acquire more wealth or power than she already has, because she knows that it's just going to go on, hypothetically, forever. She enjoys simple pleasures as exemplified by her love of the Four Seasons Day on the island during Snow and Violets. Additionally, we have her love of cake going so far as to subscribe to Cake Life magazine, as demonstrated in Did You Remember? And she'll also always do her best to help people, exemplified in that same episode when she drops like all of this time on her birthday and all of this effort that Puppycat put into it to help Cardamon, who's hurting all the while during her birthday day. Being a cyborg like this also makes Bee a perfect foil for Puppycat in the fact that she is also somebody who feels like she is in a body that's completely disjointed from who she is on the inside. She provides a place of love and non-judgment for Puppycat to think about why he's running and what he wants to do next, which comes to a head in episode 11, Bird Friend. While the whole show seems to go by pretty fast, it's implied that Puppycat is living with Bee for quite a while. Her birthday goes by twice, and Toast's pregnancy comes to a near completion. Over this time, Puppycat's layers get peeled away and he's faced face to face with Bee's unyielding and unconditional love for him, so he's unable to continue to lie about what he's doing and why he's feeling the way he's feeling, and he's unable to continue to run from personal responsibility. All the while, we watch Bee continue to deal with the double-edged issue of her potentially immortal lifespan, and watching everyone around her grow up and move forward while she just simply can't do that. This, to me, is best exemplified in episode 3, when Bee changes the topic when Deckard even tries to ask how old she is, and after Puppycat living with her for some time and them working on the temp jobs together, she realizes that she's told Puppycat almost no information about herself, They start to exchange information about each other as basic as favorite colors.
Lavender. Wait, no. Pink.
The wizard family, sans Tim, gets incredibly well fleshed out. I've seen some criticism online that people wish that the show hadn't spent so much time on the wizard family, and I truly do not understand this criticism. They provide a foil of a family that is essentially ever-changing, growing, and attempting to move forward in their own unique ways, posed against Bee, who is just simply unable to do that. Additionally, I feel like they really help to lend to that ethereal aesthetic quality that I discussed earlier about the town feeling like it's both stuck in time but constantly moving. I feel like without the constant cutaways to the wizard family and only being caught up in Bee and Puppycat's episodic adventure, we would only get the prior part of that, as in the stuck in time aspect. With the wizard family, we get their day-to-day lives, which, yes, while mundane and repetitive, do in fact move forward with or without their consent. Cass is dealing with the emotional fallout of Deckard leaving for culinary school, and also her frenemy and possibly crush Toast moves into her house and gets knocked up by her brother. All the while, people are just dismissing her as this cold and machine-like person who just loves coding. Having her brother move away is greatly affecting her.
You'll be okay if I move out? Off the island?
Well, I mean, I'm really gonna miss...
Sorry, yeah, I know you'll be fine. I guess I'm more worried about everyone else. They're also sensitive with their feelings. Not like you.
And she's often seen longing to pursue wrestling again, as evidenced by the fact that we get an entire 5-minute cutaway monologue where she just reminisces about what wrestling was like for her. She is finally, if begrudgingly, able to find some solace in the friendship offered by Bee, who she has mischaracterized as simply weird without giving her a chance. By the end of the series, Cass seems to distinctly think of Bee as a friend, and seems to regret writing her off initially. Deckard is clearly pining after Bee as a love interest. Cass obviously finds this uncomfortable due to the fact that Bee has been the same age since they were basically infants, which she points out several times throughout the series, specifically in the first episode.
Why are you feeding that little old girl lady instead of working?
No, don't call her that.
And which Bee is not really shown to know how to respond to. Obviously, Bee loves Deckard, but just not in the way that he wants. It does, in fact, seem to be ambiguous if she would even be capable of feeling that type of love, as evidenced by her response to Crispin in episode 12 to Clown Noses.
Can you at least pretend to be sad?
I am sad. Well, a part of me is. All the other parts are confused, though.
Deckard is also seen struggling with coming of age and learning to bake, while dealing with the assumption that people seem to think that because he's a good cook, he'll also be a good baker.
You're so good at cooking, I thought.
Well, you thought wrong, buddy.
As well as feeling undervalued and unseen by his family and those around him, specifically Bee.
Why is everyone trying to get me to leave?
In the very last episode, we see Deckard's walls to anything unfamiliar being forcibly beaten down by the cooking prince, somebody who earnestly wants to be his friend, and probably more if we're looking at subtext. Crispin is seen working to reconnect with his family in a way that works for him after having run away to the circus for 10 years, and then being in a serious long-term relationship with Bee for some indeterminate amount of time before finally returning to his family. Not only is he learning to be a part of his life and his family at home again, all while trying to find a way to express himself through his art that he left behind, but he's dealing with this while constantly being around Bee, who seems to be completely unaffected by their past together. Howell and Wesley are also pretty well fleshed out, but they don't go through as much of an on-screen arc, but I do feel like they foil each other in a really good way that adds a lot of both heart and comedy into the show.
Stop trying to feed people my fish. Besides, they're all either injured or sick, and no one wants to eat that.
And what about when they get better?
Then they go back to the sea.
Wesley.
Give me back my broom!
Howell is this very flamboyant, flippant, dramatic soul, kind of doing the most all of the time. And his brother that he seems to be the closest with, Wesley, is this stoic person who is, you know, closed off from even like certain members of his family, but seems to feel this close appreciation with Howl, while Howl is almost giving Wesley the same treatment that he receives. We see that he has his passions, like with the fishing and the rescuing of the fish and the nursing the fish back to health. Wesley is very passionate about things, while Howl is just dealing with burnout from trying to run the cafe. Howl doesn't seem to have a lot of his own passions other than maybe taking care of the cats, but you could really consider that more of an obligation and part of his burnout and taking care of the family. While Wesley doesn't know how to share his interests with people on his own terms in a way that works for him, as seen in episode 4. The Wizard family adds so much to the show in my opinion, both as a unit and as individual characters, as foils to each other, as foils to Bee and Puppycat for both humor and heart. They're irreplaceable. They're an irreplaceable part of the show to me. And then you have Cardamon. We spend most of the runtime of the show thinking that Cardamon is this like emotionless genius child, like tired archetype or something, but as the show goes on, we're eventually shown that he's just as overwhelmed by his situation as you would assume that a child would be, maybe even more. His mother is in a coma, his home is being filled with magical tear blobs, and he's responsible for both going to elementary school and being a normal kid, while simultaneously being a landlord to multiple adult families, perhaps even most of the families on the island, if you could assume that Violet hypothetically just owns the island.
Attention! Anyone left on my messed up island? If you want to stay on this planet, you'd better jump off and start swimming back now.
On her birthday in Did You Remember, Bee asks Cardamon how he's doing and the surface tension finally breaks and it all just comes pouring out.
Why aren't any adults helping me?
Bee asks what she can do to help, and we get what seems like a really sensible response from Cardamon actually.
Why are you asking me?
But for the rest of the show, we watch Bee try and do everything in her power to try and solve this kid's problems. And we start to get more and more cutaway glimpses of him just trying to cope with his situation, not even try to solve it, just cope. Finally, at the end of the season, we find out that Violet, his mother, is apparently supposed to have been asleep this whole time. Not only that, but Cardamon was supposed to have been asleep with her. He's placed back into a coma with his mother and is finally able to get some reprieve from his insurmountable and absurd circumstances. I do think Mooley is also worth talking about, as he is essentially the only main cast member outside of Bee, Puppycat, the Wizard family, and Cardamon. Mooley is the cat-like, wish-granting, donut-making alien from the 3rd episode. I think from a character analysis perspective, he works best if viewed as a thematic reflection of Bee. He's a well-intentioned person who is unyieldingly kind, does his best to do well by those around him, but ultimately kind of ends up messing things up. He does everything that he can to help Bee just because she bandaged his finger in temp space during episode 3. Additionally, I feel like he also works as a reflection of Bee, that he shares all those character traits as well as having the more concrete trait of seeming to be kind of lost in time and space. We don't know if he has the same potentially immortal lifespan as Bee, but it seems as though he's been around for quite a long time and been adrift in space for quite a long time, which is kind of a thematic thing that Bee, Puppycat, and Mooley all have in common. Once you get into the originally produced 13 episodes that made up Lazy in Space, I do have some small gripes with some certain creative decisions that they've made, but those are mostly few and far between. One primary issue that I have is the sound tracking. The amazing backing tracks that made the show such a vibe are still present, except during action scenes. Or rather, it might be more accurate to say that the vibey music is still being played during the action scenes, rather than the more upbeat music that was used to distinguish the action scenes in the 3 Netflix episodes. It, in my opinion, serves to hinder the feeling of Bee and Puppycat as a magical girl anime through this stretch of the show, because the action sequences fail to feel like action sequences due to being slowed down by the soundtracking. And the show is definitely leaning on its ties and resemblance to the magical girl genre, so I'm not really sure why they didn't give these segments the attention that they deserve to help flesh that piece of the show out. I just think it's a missed opportunity. Some other small gripes that I have are that Tim Wizard is left fairly uncharacterized, and Merlin Wizard's treatment isn't all that much better, although if you pay attention to some smaller cues throughout the show, you get a fairly clear picture of Merlin, whereas the rest of the Wizard family has ample time spent on characterizing them on screen so that they feel integral and important in this little world. Still, they do fit a lot in with their runtime, and they do give Tim some characterization. I just maybe would have liked to have seen a little bit more if I'm being picky. I feel most confident speaking to character and story analysis, but I do want to talk about some other aspects of the show. As I said, the soundtrack has done an excellent job of keying into a fairly modern trend of this like lo-fi music as easy listening, and I think a lot can be said to the point of a show being intentionally like sleepy and comfortable. They also make good use of Puppycat's lullaby as a repeated motif throughout the rest of the show. The visual aesthetics of the show remind me a lot of the Kirby video games, kind of the idea of this extraterrestrial universe that, while it has some dangers, is more cute and friendly rather than scary and unknown. I think they do a really smart job of connecting the themes of whatever is going on in the temp job with whatever is going on the island with the characters that day. CJ the X says in his video about subjectivity in art, which I will link below, says that cohesion in art is when all of the discrete pieces of the art are aware of each other, and I think that Bee and Puppycat executes on that really well. Everything isn't always the same as each other, but I do think that all of the discrete pieces are aware of each other. Some examples of this are in episode 10, Puppycat is finally exemplifying his love of Bee by making good on her birthday request to hide cakes everywhere. Bee and Puppycat's friendship is foiled against Cardamon being alone with his mother stuck in a coma, as well as in the temp job, they go to a dishwashing planet where the dishwasher has hired them simply for company. Puppycat even lampshades the theming of this episode by asking the dishwasher, the common theme of the episode obviously being friendship and our connection to those around us, and the effect it can have when we're deprived of that. To really drive it home, we even get cuts of Deckard sad and alone at cooking school, feeling deprived of his connection to Bee and his family. So I took the absolute briefest of breaks from filming and went into another room, and my cat bowled over my wine glass. There was wine everywhere, so we've moved on to the bottle. Another pretty clear example to me of the temp work thematically reflecting what's going on the island and with the characters is that throughout the episode 5 Littlefingers, there is a common theme of excess and consumption. Puppycat keeps making in-app purchases on Bee's phone, even though it is causing consistent harm to both himself and Bee. We get to watch Toast take over even more of Cass's life by getting knocked up by one of her brothers. Cardamon hears this and his immediate reaction is,
Now I can raise their rent.
Meanwhile, the temp job ends up being for these two finger people who summon up a temp worker to open up this can of soda that's far bigger than both of them together could ever possibly indulge in, so that they can experience it with their weird little fingers, even though they are fingers. We watch Puppycat fold on his selfish and consumptive behavior throughout the episode and eventually self-sacrifice and help Bee pay off the debt he incurred. Puppycat again drives this theme home with comedy right at the end of the episode when we see him gobbling up eggs off the floor and then saying, I got salmonella from eating eggs off the floor. Bee took care of me till I felt better a week later. It's not like it's a kid's show or anything, so it's not like there has to be a lesson at the end of every episode, but each story that a television show tells should have ideas or themes that it addresses using its characters and setting, and then say something about them, which I think Bee and Puppycat does very well. This same sense of cohesion plays over the series as an arc, as we see common themes of coming of age, the passage of time, and how our relationships with others can change and better us. Deckard, Cass, and Cardamon are all on a coming of age journey at different stages of their life. This comes to a climax in the finale, where we can feel the palpable energy of despair come over the community as Bee is essentially killed. She's a crucial member of their community, and without her, the community is unsure of who they are and what parts of them are real or most important. I don't know much to say about the voice cast other than that I think it's really phenomenal. Having Terry Hawks, who plays Toast, on the voice cast to pay homage to Sailor Moon.
Why is it cold?
And Steve Blum, who played Tom on the Toonami block on Cartoon Network.
Violet! Get out of my beautiful face.
To pay homage to the animation that paved the way for Bee and Puppycat is really cathartic and sweet. Jennifer Tilly as Violet is the most ridiculous and entertaining thing that I can possibly imagine.
This place is a mess. What did you do?
Cardamon's voice actor has gotten a little bit of flack due to the length of the production and the fact that his voice ended up changing over time, but I think that he does a really great job, and I think that he actually delivers some of the most emotionally powerful and cathartic moments in the entire show, so I don't know what that's about.
I wish I wasn't a landlord anymore.
Overall, there's this really down-to-earth conversational feel to all of the voice cast that really lends itself to that slice of life energy in a way that I've never seen in another TV show ever. The use of the Oliver Vocaloid for Puppycat's voice helps to distinguish him from other animals in the show. It also distinguishes him from the rest of the people on the island as an outsider to the community thematically, which is really great. And most importantly, it lends itself to some majorly hilarious moments. Like the Vocaloid saying yes sometimes when his subtitles say no. 10 out of 10, wouldn't change a thing.
You love me.
Yes.
I love you too. I love this purse! Ah!
Yes!
Package it, send it, stamp it, I love it, we're done. Also, Natalie Wynn, also known as ContraPoints on YouTube, voices one of the Space Warlocks, which is just the most important voice casting that I didn't know that I needed. I don't think I've done this far, and I very specifically wore this shirt for this. So look at this Puppycat shirt. This is a Puppycat shirt my boyfriend got me. This is the cutest shit I've ever seen. They fear me, for I fear nothing. Same, girl. Part 7. Representation. I feel as though Bee and Puppycat does an excellent job on representation. The show is, for the most part, not about things that would often highlight the representation aspect, but they slide it in there. Which, given Natasha Allegri's history of bubbling fan art as early as 2011, I'm not surprised by this. Puppycat, aka the Space Outlaw, which is important for this piece, is almost certainly bisexual. He seems flustered by both Pretty Patrick and Wesley in a way that would not be common for a heterosexual adult man to be flustered by another adult man. Additionally, he consistently comments on how attractive he finds Pretty Patrick, and seems to imply how attractive he finds Wesley. He's also implicitly romantically involved with Violet when the two of them are traveling as candy hunters. I also have a theory that because of the shape of Cardamon's hair, that either Puppycat or Bee's dad are Cardamon's dad, but this is just a theory, and frankly, the hair stuff is most of what I have to back it up. So, the whole wizard family appears to be maybe mixed race, as they are all distinctly depicted with darker skin than both Bee and Toast, who are definitely supposed to be white. The wizard family have these darker skin tones in varying degrees. Howl is very obviously queer-coded, although nothing more than his mannerisms and interactions with other characters lead us to believe that he might be gay. He's gay. A lot of people have interpreted different members of the wizard family as being neurodivergent in different ways. Wesley with his hyperfixation on fishing and caring for injured marine life, and Crispin with the way that he engages with the clown aesthetic as art and doesn't want his family to spend time with him out of social obligation. Cass is definitely meant to be either gay or bisexual, as she is flustered when the people in her online coding chat room indicate that they think she likes Toast, and Toast is indicated to have had an ex-wife during the Kickstarter run. The only implication that Cass would be heterosexual, because let's go ahead and go with gay until proven straight, is that she seems to denote the bird that she kisses in Bird Friend as a male, which feels like looser evidence than her being into toast. Cass is shown in other media besides the show to have vitiligo, a condition that causes spots on the skin to be lighter than others. If I'm saying that word wrong, somebody please, for the love of God, correct me. Additionally, Deckard has both heterochromia and a speech impediment. The point I'm trying to make by listing out this long list of diversity that the Bee and Puppycat cast has is that none of these things are discussed directly in the text, because they don't really come up, because all of these people already know each other. Instead, we're shown these things visually or implicitly through the way that the plot moves along, which is honestly one of the best ways that you can do good diversity and representation. It doesn't always have to be about the fact that a character is black, or that a character is mixed race, or that a character is gay, or that a character is neurodivergent, or that a character has vitiligo. It's the same thing with disabilities, like the speech impediment on Deckard, or that a character is making out with birds. It's just really nice to see a show effortlessly have a diverse cast. One last thing is on the voice cast, we do have Natalie Wynn. We talked about this earlier. She is a YouTuber better known by her channel name ContraPoints. She is the voice cast for one of the space warlocks that are after Puppycat. I remember when I first heard it, I was like,
you were there when we got really close to catching this guy last time, and now you show up again with this. It's obvious you want to help us.
That can't be Natalie Wynn. Is that Natalie Wynn? I looked at my boyfriend and I was like, one of the space warlocks sounds like one of my YouTubers that I watch. And he was like, I hear what you're saying, but I don't think that's it. And then I looked it up and it was Natalie Wynn. I was shook. I was gagged. I was launched into the sun.
Take us to the guy whose name I forgot. Now!
But anyways, we love seeing gay, trans talent. Gay or trans talent. But Natalie happens to be, as she would say, trans gay. So we stan it. Part 8. Other media, merchandise, and tie-ins. 2 shots of vodka. Less depressed. Alright. There's a series of tie-in comic books to go with the series. There were 11 issues spread across 3 volume collections. There were originally slated to be 16, but numbers 12 through 16 were unceremoniously cancelled and never put into publication. Although we do know that at least some work was done on these, as these issues do actually have cover art and synopses to go with them, so who knows what happened. I took it upon myself to read these comics, and they were nothing special. While Natasha Allegri is involved with each issue as either a writer or illustrator in some way, some of the issues consist of several vignette stories by different writers. Sometimes they're as short as 1 page, and then other issues consist of one story taking up basically the entire issue, so there's not really a lot of rhyme or reason to the format of these things. At their best, these stories feel like they add in a cute little fun additional magical girl monster of the week adventure to the Bee and Puppycat canon, and in some cases, the different art styles from story to story within an individual issue can feel jarring at best or make the issue nearly incomprehensible at worst. One of the issues had 5 separate stories presented in less than 15 pages. Aside from a handful that span most of an issue with just one story, these comics mostly feel like disjointed Bee and Puppycat fan comics with mismatched artwork, although they are in fact additional official canon content. The only really plot relevant thing that happens or appears to happen over the course of all of these comics is that Bee and Puppycat are asked to go deal with complaints from their very first job. That is the job where they had to go watch the baby on the planet, and then the baby's mouth unhinged and the monster lady from Puppycat's past emerged. And the mother wants to know where her son is basically the gist of it. This happens during several different stories within the issues, but I've only read 2 parts to that piece after scanning through all of the comics, and it doesn't seem like it actually got wrapped up. It's possible that it was supposed to be dealt with in volumes 12 through 16, but as of right now, it more or less feels like a mention of a potential extended plot thread rather than actually resolving one. There's a fairly robust official merchandise store featuring some minimalist design apparel and some official poster prints, and also for some reason a body pillow featuring Puppycat on it. I'm not really sure to what end you would want that, but here we are. There's a little bit shy of about 30 items in the store total, which I know sounds like a pretty low number considering I just said it was robust, but I actually feel like that's pretty robust for a 16-episode Netflix show that was produced back in 2019 and released on Netflix over a year ago. So there's also an official plush of Puppycat, which I have, but my boyfriend knew about them beforehand and set an alert up, was watching his email like a hawk, and ordered it as soon as they were posted for sale. I believe he ordered it within 30 minutes of it being posted, and he got another email alert a little while later. They were sold out within 4 hours. It has then sold out several times over since then, and the demand for the merch is obviously there, and a Puppycat plush feels like so obvious, as honestly as well as some other plushes, but for some reason most of their merchandising focus seems to be on simple print items. Natasha Allegri published a cookbook called Easy Eats featuring Bee and Puppycat art, characters, and content throughout. The framing given at the beginning of the book is that Bee and Puppycat as characters love food, and so therefore you, the consumer, should want to engage with characters through the art of cooking. It's cute, the art is clearly bespoke for the book, and a lot of love went into it. Unfortunately, it seems to have had a very limited release, and other than looking up a PDF of it, which is what I did to view the contents of the book, purchasing one can cost you up to $1,000 because at this point all you can get is a used copy, and with something that has that limited of a release and kind of has a cult following, people are gonna, do a capitalism. And while Natasha Allegri is credited with authoring the book on the book itself, I will say it's not listed anywhere else that this was her creation. I actually can't really figure out who's credited with authoring it other than looking at her name on the front of the book. So I guess we'll just have to take the book at face value. Maybe it was ghostwritten, maybe it was one of those publishing houses that commissions a book, and then there is plenty of fan fiction, fan art, and fan-made merchandise and prints. On the dedicated subreddit, I came across a fight stick, a fan-made cookbook, ostensibly unrelated to the official one, crochet plushies, sprite art, stained glass art, and more. Someone even had a Bee and Puppycat tattoo. And that was after only about 30 minutes of scrolling down the subreddit, which was only equal to 10 days of real time worth of posts. Speaking of the subreddit, I thought that I should mention how well categorized and moderated and how active this subreddit is. People are constantly compiling additional information and adding to it. Everything is tagged based on whether it's related to the YouTube show or the Netflix show. People are making new GIFs every day for it, you name it. A lot of my searching for this video turned up very helpful and well-sourced posts in the subreddit. If you're a fan of this show and aren't a part of this subreddit, I would highly recommend checking it out and joining the subreddit. Lastly, there is a fan wiki. However, it seems to have mostly only been cataloged back when the Kickstarter show was running, and very sparse updates have been made to it since Lazy in Space released, which means that it's actually not that good of a source for the Bee and Puppycat canon, because when the Kickstarter show released, there was only about an hour worth of canon content, and now there are several hours worth of canon content and all these side projects, so it is not a great source of truth for the Bee and Puppycat canon, much to my dismay when trying to look up things in the Bee and Puppycat wiki when trying to make this video. Part 9. What now? Throughout 2022, Netflix went through several rounds of laying off entire project teams from their animation department, and in July, their VP of Animation, Melissa Cobb, stepped down from her role, remaining on their board as a producer. Several projects were canceled, including a personal favorite of mine, a Pendleton Ward project, Season 2 of The Midnight Gospel. With such aggressive changes and downsizing to their animation department, Bee and Puppycat's future at Netflix would appear to be precarious at best. At the time of writing this video, Netflix has not commented one way or another on a renewal or a cancellation for Bee and Puppycat. As of the beginning of 2023, Toho International has purchased a 50% stake in several Frederator Studios projects, Bee and Puppycat included. WoW Unlimited Media is a Canadian animation and media holding company In layman's terms, and this is not an entirely accurate definition, but the holding company is created to hold on to certain stocks and assets of a company that would otherwise maybe be up for debate or arbitration when one company is acquiring another. So WoW Unlimited Media is a holding company that was made to hold specifically Frederator Studios as well as some other media groups. In 2021, a deal was struck that finalized in 2022 for Genius Brands to acquire WoW Unlimited Media. Genius Brands is an entertainment company headed by Andy Hayward. I promise this is all gonna wrap around and be relevant. Genius Brands is an entertainment company headed by Andy Hayward, a cartoon entertainment industry professional with a long history at Hanna-Barbera, the company responsible for Scooby-Doo and the Flintstones, among other household animation titles. So if you're following here, which I'm not, I'm drunk. Toho was able to purchase the 50% stake that they have in the Frederator Studios projects from Genius Brands. Genius Brands acquired WoW Unlimited Media. Toho International and Genius Brands have a relationship. Toho International was therefore able to purchase the stake that they purchased in the Frederator Studios projects through Genius Brands because Genius Brands owns WoW Unlimited Media. WoW Unlimited Media is currently holding Frederator Networks. Holy fuck. What a goddamn mess. I'm gonna link an article below that explains this whole acquisition. If you're not following along, who cares? Fuck capitalism. Hiro Matsuoka, president of Toho International, has made comments about the acquisition of stake in these properties being a focus of retail success. The online merch store I mentioned earlier was only launched in September of 2022 and was an effort by Toho International. They have hinted at expanding the universe and the content of Bravest Warriors, one of the other properties that they acquired, another brainchild of Pendleton Ward, and have mentioned being Puppycat in that same breath. A specific quote by Matsuoka says, "With our production resources and distribution capabilities across Asia, complementing Genius Brands and Frederator Network's expansive network in key markets around the world, we anticipate these two properties will continue to develop a global fan base as we introduce new content and merchandise. For right now, the future is unclear." However, such a major acquisition, paired with public statements and the major success that the Netflix series has seen, would indicate that we may see a continuation of Being Puppycat in the near future. However, with success comes certain pitfalls. Even if that were to happen, if we look back to the beginning of all this, all the way back to the Kickstarter, the goal was always to keep stakeholders and corporate greed as far away from Being Puppycat as possible. You can tell by taking a look at Natasha's Tumblr for even 1 minute that the reason that Being Puppycat has been such a success is that she loves not only the work that she does, but loves and pays homage to the properties that Being Puppycat were built on. All these things that Being Puppycat's success was built on the back of. Natasha loves these properties just as much as you or I do, and she's been able to maintain a ton of creative control over the project until now. Maybe they won't offer adequate rates to bring back prominent voice actors such as Jennifer Tilly or Terry Hawks. Or maybe the backing of a larger company with more resources will improve the show even further. It's difficult to tell, and without insider knowledge of what Toho even intends to do with Being Puppycat or why they purchased their stake in it in the first place, the future for the series seems as precarious and obscured as ever. Part 10. Again, for the first time. I really love Being Puppycat. And while my tone throughout this video may have indicated that I have some kind of disdain or dislike for the original shorts of the Kickstarter series, that's just not the case. I love those too. I personally have a preference for high production value and sharper focuses on certain vibes and themes that I think that the Netflix show better reflects, but so far, all Being Puppycat is good Being Puppycat in my book. I love being able to support something as lovingly crafted and well made as Being Puppycat. I mentioned a comparison earlier to the video game Stardew Valley, but I actually think that the comparison goes beyond those initial aesthetic comparisons that I made earlier. Stardew Valley was a passion project created by one person, Eric Barone, also known as Concerned Ape, in a room by himself, determined to create something start to finish, just to add to his portfolio, and chose to base it on properties from his childhood that he loved and still cared about. From there, it grew and grew and grew until it was something beautiful that could no longer be contained by one person. I can't help but feel like when we see this story unfold, a piece of art that is so good and so lovingly crafted that it simply beats the odds and becomes an international success, we have to cheer for that. One 10-minute short from a cartoon incubator had to raise over $600,000 from its fans which it blew out of the water by raising almost 150% of its goal, then had to fight an uphill battle in the streaming wars to ever see the light of day. The dedicated creative team that lovingly crafted a second season had their work tossed around and leaked before it could ever be properly delivered to the public audience that was so lovingly waiting for it, only for Netflix to pick it up and go, "Nah, this is still good. Give it some quick fixes and ship it out." Now, after seeing massive success on that internationally recognized platform, it's been purchased by a major international entertainment company. If I were Natasha Allegri, I would be overwhelmed. Frankly, I'm overwhelmed even thinking about it. And while this is my first video on this platform, I hope to see some kind of reflection in myself and what happened with these projects. One person, sitting alone in a room, determined to create something start to finish. That's been my goal with this video the entire time. I have other projects and other ideas that I'd love to continue to make videos on, but I told myself, you have to sit down, you have to write this one script, you have to finish something from start to finish and deliver it to an audience. And I would love to see that something I lovingly crafted alone in a room, determined to see something from start to finish, get the same kind of love, even on a tiny small scale, that Stardew Valley has gotten and that Puppycat has gotten. If you haven't already, and you somehow sat through this entire video anyways, first of all, thank you. Second of all, please go watch Puppycat. Frankly, even if you don't find the plot and characters that compelling, I really do think that there is something to be said about a comfy show for comfy's sake, and this show is as comfy as it gets. Assuming you have seen Puppycat, keep playing it on Netflix, leave it on when you go to sleep, play it for your pets, just continue to play it, keep buying the merch, keep mentioning it to your friends. We live in a dystopian capitalist nightmare, and if corporate executives smell money on this thing, then we'll definitely get more of it. That's just kind of how the world works. I've had a great and interesting time working on my first video. I hope that you enjoyed watching. Thank you so much for being here. You know, if you feel compelled to engage with me at all, if you have thoughts based on something I said, if you agree with me, if you disagree with me, please post something in the comments, because again, this is my first video. I don't have any subscribers on this channel, so if you're thinking something and you're like, oh, well, I never comment on a YouTube video, because like, right, there's 1,000 comments on a YouTube video. I don't have 1,000 comments. I'm gonna see it, I'm gonna respond. If you don't comment, who's going to? Thank you so much for watching. My name is Snacks. Have a good night.